All right, folks, it is Monday, November 25th, 3 days before Thanksgiving. And of course, we've got all kinds of things going on in the world and in the news. And we'll be talking about that here on World Edition. We'll see if folks get ready to join us and what they've got on their minds as well. But definitely a lot's going on in the world, and we'll definitely be talking about that and seeing what folks have got to say about a number of these things. At least one person is dead after a DHL cargo plane crashed into a house, and that took place in Lithuania, killing one, according to local officials. So, one dead, three injured after that DHL cargo jet crashed in Lithuania. So, definitely that's something that was going on near the Vilnius airport. And Israel and Hezbollah mount new attacks amid ceasefire talks. So Hezbollah fires a wave of projectiles into Israel's after deadly strike in Lebanon. So definitely that's something that folks will be talking about, as well as a man was wounded by shrapnel in northern Israel amid renewed rocket fire from Lebanon. And the world seeks an end to plastic pollution at talks in South Korea. They are saying that the planet is in crisis, and some folks are wondering how we can solve our plastic problem. In South Korea, nations are meeting in the final round to address the global plastic crisis. So apparently, plastic waste is everywhere, and folks are trying to figure out different solutions and all along those lines. And Romania's pro-Putin shooting star went viral on TikTok. So a far-right candidate takes shock lead in Romania presidential elections, and some folks are trying to figure out who he is. Calin Georgescu, and that is Romania's right-wing candidate leading the elections, and definitely that's something that folks will be talking about as well. And Iran's Khamenei calls for the death sentence for Israeli leaders, not arrest warrants. So the International Criminal Court is not the venue to hold Israel to account, according to the Washington Post. And definitely the Independent is saying that Netanyahu's arrest warrant will throw the very future of the ICC into question, and even Alan Dershowitz to assemble a team to defend Israel in The Hague, and even saying that the rule of law is disgraced by the ICC. And the UAE arrests three Yazbek nationals for the killing of an Israeli Moldovan rabbi. So, New York Times changes headline about murdered Dubai rabbi following public outcry. Call it for what it is what some folks are saying. And missing rabbi killed in the UAE in a heinous anti-Semitic terror incident, according to what Israel says. So definitely kin of the slain Israeli rabbi said they warned him against moving to the UAE for this tragic reason. And Egyptian officials say 17 people are missing after a tourist yacht sank in rough water on the Red Sea. So, Egypt tourist boat sinks off the Red Sea and 17 are missing. Egyptian authorities say 17 people are missing after the tourist boat sank in the Red Sea. So, that's something else that folks can be talking about as well. An Israeli prime minister approves Lebanon ceasefire deal in principle, according to sources. So far right warns against emerging Lebanon ceasefire as Hezbollah barrages continues. U.S. believes Israel Hezbollah ceasefire deal reached, according to senior officials yesterday. But definitely a lot's going on as that war continues to rage as well. And prosecutors request a 20-year sentence for Dominique Pellicot in a mass rape trial. So 51 men were charged with raping her. Gazelle Pellicot gives closing statements in this shocking French trial. So French mass rape trial prosecutors demand maximum sentence for the ex-husband. And definitely that's something that's going on in France's largest rape trial. And Uruguay's center left reclaims power in the presidential election. Uruguay's leftist opposition candidate becomes the country's new president. So Uruguay ousted the conservative government, electing leftist opposition candidate as turnout hit 90%. So in Uruguay, a presidential election focused on democratic coexistence. And as I said before, Russia and Ukraine traded drone strikes as Zelensky calls on allies for unwavering aid. So Russia and Ukraine trade missile and drone strikes. And definitely that's something going on as there are attacks in Ukraine's east, south, and the capital area as well. And Philippines president slams vice president's assassination plot. The Philippine President Marcos says he'll fight Vice President's plot to have him killed. So Philippines Marco vows to fight troubling threat of VP Sara Duterte. And definitely the Vice President of the Philippines says she hired assassin to kill President and his wife if needed. And Storm Bert batters the UK with rain and fierce winds, killing at least three. So Storm Bert, Environmental Secretary, says flood defenses in worst condition on record after the Tory government. And at least five killed as Storm Bert lashes Britain, causing flood and travel chaos. So that's something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And a British man captured by Russians while fighting with Ukraine. A British man captured by Russian forces while fighting for Ukraine in Kursk region, according to state media. James Scott Rise Anderson, that is the British ex-soldier captured in Russia's Kursk region, and definitely we might be hearing more about this as well. Republicans push back against Democrats' claim that Trump intelligence pig Gabbard is involved with Russia and all along those lines. So GOP Senator Mullen says outright dangerous for Dem senators to call Trump's intel chief pick compromise. And it definitely looks like, according to The Economist, Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard are coming for the spook. So Republicans lash out as Democrats claim that Trump intelligence pick Gabbard is compromised. And at the COP29 climate finance deal, criticized as a travesty of justice and stage madness, climate diplomacy is a $300 billion failure, according to The Atlantic. So that's definitely something that we're seeing in the news as well. And an inferno destroyed thousands of shanties in Manila's biggest slum area, and Australia drops plans to find social media giants accused of enabling misinformation. So the Australian government's anti-misinformation crusade threatens free speech worldwide. So that's something else that we'll be seeing people talking about as well. And apparently Modi won back India's big economic prize 5 months after losing it. And according to the NDTV, folks are wondering how Ajit Pawar holds the key to Devnavis versus Ishandi in the chief minister race. So definitely we'll be seeing what goes on in that world as well. So definitely a lot's going on in the world, including a Russian-made plane agent catches fire after landing in Turkey's Antalya. So passengers flee in terror after Russia's Sukhoi Superjet 100 airliner burst into flames on the runway. So that's something else that folks are talking about in the news as well. And the government of Laos is saddened by the deaths of foreign tourists. So don't drink the spirits. Laos backpackers avoid shots after suspected poisoning, and that took place yesterday. And the father of the Australian teen who died in Laos urges government to protect others from tainted alcohol. So definitely it looks like that's going on as well. And also, Pakistani police aroused thousands of Imran Khan supporters as capital under lockdown ahead of rally. And Haiti is wondering what's next as gang violence surges and the push for a UN peacekeeping mission flops. So more than 100 suspected gang members have been killed as vigilantism grows in Haiti. So Haiti's vigilante deal major blow to gang leader barbecue in furious battle. So that's something else that's in the news that folks might be having thoughts about as well. And famine hit Sudan camp gets first aid convoy in months. So Sudan is in danger of becoming a failed state. Jan England warns, and definitely WFB scales up operations to reach millions in Sudan. And Sudan is on a countdown to famine, according to the AIDS group. So definitely that's what's going on. And in other news from Australia, Australia should delay the school ban for children under 16, Big Tech says, and the Australian Prime Minister plays down the privacy fears of social media ban for children. So school bullies have moved online, but it's banning all under 16s from social media actually going to be effective and all along those lines. So that's just some of the news from around the world and all along those lines. I'll see who's with me, and we might get to some U.S. news as well, and all along those lines. So definitely we've got Nick Palveda joining us, and we've also got Sasha Starr joining us as well. So a lot's going on in the world, including some things going on in the United States as well. So definitely looks like the Menendez brothers are to appear virtually in court for a resentencing bid discussion. So the Mendez brothers are set to appear in court for the first time in 28 years. And a lot of people remember that famous case and everything. And it definitely looks like Trump is getting some picks, including the pick for Treasury Secretary. And I got to remember who that gentleman is, but it looks like that pick is doing well. It pleases Wall Street. So definitely a lot of people are glad that Scott Bessent was picked to lead the Treasury, and the dollar falls as traders bet Bessent will dilute extreme policy. So they're thinking that he might be good, and the Dow futures gained 300 points Monday following Trump's pick of Bessent for Treasury. And definitely looks like Christopher Ruffo has Trump's ear and wants to end the DEI for good. So a lot of things are going on, including possibly another White House run or the possibility of being California governor for Kamala Harris. She's unsure of her next steps after losing the election, according to reports, and she did have that whirlwind 107-day campaigns, and she's saying that she's telling her advisors and allies to keep her political options open. So I guess she's trying to figure out what she's going to do in that space and all along those lines. So definitely lots going on in the world, including folks that are possibly facing deportation. So definitely, and they're also saying Trump's team is barred from agencies amid a legal standoff because Trump refuses to disclose who is funding his transition. So I guess he doesn't want us to know who's actually funding the transition. So there's a lot going on in the world, including right here in the U.S. So how you find gentlemen doing? Oh, you got that Mickey Mouse thing going on again, Nick. So I don't know what's going on. You got that Mickey Mouse thing that happens every once in a while where the voice sounds like either Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, one of them things in that way and everything. So definitely might have to have you go out and everything. Was it you, Sasha, that used to talk about Lululemon as a, or I think I'm pronouncing it right and everything, but apparently a Connecticut couple was charged in $1 million theft of Lululemon goods and everything. So apparently they did that in 5 states. But if I remember correctly from your investment show, wasn't that one of the investments that used to do really well and everything? Maybe that's why people are going after it and everything. Or am I thinking about another product that you used to back in addition to Nvidia?
Hmm. You got me, Mark. I can't recall what you have in mind exactly.
Yeah,
What
I
what
just
do you
remember on the investment show there was like a clothing line, and I think it was Lululemon that you used to talk about as being a good investment. But I could be wrong; it might have been a different company. But I just saw that they
something different? I can't figure out what you're talking exactly. Um,
well,
doesn't ring the bell. You have company Lululemon, the symbol Lulu, but lately I didn't.
no, that's the one I was talking about. I just said it wrong. It's Lululemon. Lululemon is
Lululemon, but
yeah.
well, it's a company. It's doing very well. I haven't recommended their stock lately because with so many things going in crypto in high tech companies or so on, it was very difficult for me to go outside, not being sure that it's gonna work out. But I think for those people who have lower expectations and they have sights on solid, most likely winning idea, Lulu is the place to be, in my opinion. But personally, at this point, I wouldn't invest.
Hey, speaking of people, and this is for both you and Jatovi, because I know that he is I think he's a boxer, and a Ukrainian boxer, but I know Joe Rogan got some very good traction when he was interviewing Trump, President-elect Trump, and everything. But now he's getting some criticism from a Ukrainian boxer. So Vladimir Klitschko is taking a jab at Joe Rogan for spreading Russian propaganda. So the Ukrainian boxer is slamming Joe Rogan, saying you're using Putin's only weapon, propaganda. So I guess he's ranting against Biden and Zelensky for also. Joe Rogan was ranting against Biden and Zelensky for trying to start World War III, and then this boxer is basically saying that he is fallen into the Russian propaganda. So, have you heard about this incident with the boxer and Joe Rogan? And what is your take on that, Sasha?
It's nothing to do with the boxer. It is a prism through which Russia and Ukraine are being viewed in the United States and in the West. For them, for almost 100 years, less than that, but almost that, that territory was perceived as a Soviet Union. And Soviet Union was equivalent of Russia. You don't really see much difference between Russia and Soviet Union, except that today Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, but Russia is. All other republics, such as Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, they were viewed as a kind of a satellites of Russia. There's some kind of a Russian territories, not 100%, but 95%. So they are governed by Russia. They are in Russian orbit, and they wouldn't have really any chance to being viewed as something different until very recently because of this war. Now, why people dismiss, most people dismiss Ukraine, let's be blunt about it, and they are talking about Russia, 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 and even people like Rogan and others and some influential people. See, historically, in times of Soviet Union, there was Soviet Union. Nobody would talk about Ukraine or anything like this because it was part of Soviet Union. So why would you talk about Ukraine? There was no reason for that. Now, in Russia, with its incredible corruption, it was relatively easy, sometimes so risky, but still possible to get into favorable positions through corruption and through bribes, through some other means, and make a quick buck. It was possible in Russia. So if you are going to Russia and approach higher power, sooner or later you will hit it right and you will get good contract or good deal on raw materials or something else. So people are therefore, even now when it's obvious what kind of country it is, that Putin is murderer, people in the West are still believing that, okay, now it's not the right time, but it's time coming. So there will be peace, and then we will go there and we will bribe and we will dance and we will go around and maybe we will score a good contract or so on. So all this so-called love for Russia is based on corrupted thinking that one day they will extract some kind of use for themselves and therefore they will benefit from it. And this is exactly what's going on in US and many Western country politics.
Just to point out, it was Vladimir Klitschko, his brother Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah.
They dominated the heavyweight division for an era. Matter of fact, they dominated the heavyweights after Mike Tyson left out of the heavyweight division, and it bounced around from a bunch of different characters. But Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko, as soon as the Ukrainian war started happening, this is years after they had retired from boxing, they ended up enlisting and defending Ukraine. On top of that, actually, Nick, you should like them. They play chess. That was one of the biggest things with Vladimir and Vitaly is they played chess, and they were actually part of the push to do the chess versus or the chess and boxing combination, where a round you would play chess, the next round you're boxing, a round you would play chess, the
It's
next round.
popular in Europe, by the way. It's very popular.
So yeah, that's who that is, and they spoke out just as many have spoken out against.
Nick, while you're in Europe, you may explore this and maybe even try your luck.
Chess is a lot more popular here in Europe. There's two big international tournaments taking place in Barcelona this month.
Oh, yeah.
And those tournaments, the Sunway Sitges, and also they have the hospital lover God. So they've got several big ones here. But Spain is like the 10th largest chess community in the world. It's amazing.
And by the way, today we have in Singapore first game of the World Chess Championship.
World Chess Championship, which will get no press in the United States, but in Europe
Absolutely.
and Asia, it's big.
But it does get press here on Pod TV because I know that I do know that Ken Regan and Star talked about it on Sasha's show this past weekend, and they'll probably be talking about it this coming weekend after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Rick.
So I looked it up. Like Ukraine has been Ukraine and Poland lie between empires, and they're always getting overrun and stomped. And Ukraine has been the site of dozens of massacres, with a dozen or so by the Soviets, and then a bunch during World War II by the Nazis. And then in 1932 and 33, Soviet agricultural policy killed more Ukrainians than any other mass death, between 3.5 and 5 million Ukrainians, more than 10% of the population, because of, and people aren't sure whether Stalin was deliberately killing Ukrainians or whether it was a combination of Stalin's malice and stupid agricultural policy. But
we get why the Ukrainians don't like Russians, because the Russians kill Ukrainians en masse. But my question is, why do the Russian people support Putin? That's my question. I'm going like, the guy is obviously a nut, and yet he's got a lot of support from people in Russia.
Does he really have that much?
That deals with propaganda. And what is pushed out, how he controls the media around what he's saying. It's the same thing with North Korea. A lot also similar to what goes on in China. It's basically a propaganda machine that pushes out information. Anything dissenting is taken out and not accepted. So, for example, in China, hence the reason why during the Olympics, and there was the match between, I think it was Chinese Taipei and actually mainland China, China actually censored the parts where China lost or were losing in that match. They didn't allow that to be seen. They only played what was shown about glorification of China. So it's the same thing in Russia. That's how you actually, it's propaganda and media messaging. And
we'll talk about that some on the media show as well. I do have a question for you, Nick, since your since your mic is working and everything like that. Vivek and Elon Musk are putting together their team of folks that will be part of that government efficiency and all along those lines. So I just wanted to know if you were going to try to get a job on this team, since they are putting together their team and they are building a DOGE team for the war with Washington and everything. And definitely I know that you're a big proponent of them curtailing their spending in Washington. So I just want to know if you're going to join that team, because even Steve's favorite person, Fareed Zakaria, said that Trump's DOGE will force the GOP to confront what they've been avoiding for decades. So are you going to join this team?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I have some professional and personal reasons to root out some of the people in Washington, D.C., to the extent where my plan is to be a member of the Washington Bar in 2025, and because you're going to get admitted to Florida, and then also get a residence and an office there, because they're causing me a lot of trouble. Your friends in Washington and the leftover huge amounts of money that Joe Biden dumped into government agencies to harass small businesses. So yeah, I want to see these people rooted out. Yes.
Well, maybe you can get a job there and everything. Does anybody?
I don't want
I know that you're no longer here.
Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy don't want jobs. I don't want a job. I want to do it for personal reasons to root these people out.
You want to do it. Maybe you'll be a lobbyist instead of having a job. But I did have a question for everybody, but particularly those of us that are tied to agriculture areas like North Carolina and California. Does anybody have any idea? Because, the agriculture is a big business in North Carolina. So do we know anything about Brooke Rollins, who apparently is the woman that's going to be running the agriculture department, other than she's a Trump loyalist? But what else do we know about this woman?
The family's undertaken time by the Department of Agriculture. Now, this will be very interesting because they subsidize farms. In English, When we had farms in my family, we were given free money back from the government to not farm. It is a complete waste. Thank you, federal government, for making me rich by giving my grandparents a lot of money to do nothing. This is the Department of Agricultural Waste that hopefully, it's going to be interesting, that Elon and Vidic will get rid of. But the person who's the secretary of Department of Agriculture, her family received $4 million in government subsidies to do nothing. It is a complete big waste. They should shut the Department of Agriculture down, and the sooner the better.
But speaking of waste and everything, apparently Trump's pick to run the FDA is a top executive of a company that provides compounded weight loss drugs and everything. So I know that RFK is big into weight drugs, and apparently so is the new head of the FDA. So we're going to have a push for folks to be losing weight, even if it's done through drugs versus done through like exercise and everything like that.
Yeah, we're too fat. But let's listen to Rick.
I want to talk about another Trump policy he's announced that has some people in a tizzy. Trump says he's going to kick 15,000 trans people out of the military.
Yes.
And I got to say, my brother he left the military as lieutenant colonel, but he was also an Orthodox Jew and a stand-up comedian. And I think at least if you're a military officer, there's some leeway to pursue your own interests and be your own person. As an Orthodox Jew, he had to wear a yarmulke, he had to pray certain times of the day, he had food restrictions, and he loved it because he liked to fuck with people. And as a Marine, people go, sir, what's that beanie on your head? And then he would ream him out for not knowing what it was. And as a stand-up comedian, he would call people impersonating generals, send lieutenants running all over the base, showing up where they, I've got an appointment with General Eden. No, they didn't. It was just my brother messing around. So, if my brother could be as unique and crazy as he was in the military, I feel like there's some leeway for people to be trans.
I don't think he can do it. But let's defer to our constitutional expert, Adam Lamparero, about whether or not you can discriminate against trans people.
In my view, that would present equal protection clause issues. So the answer is probably no. I don't think it's a major issue, though. I don't think it should take up too much of the media's time. This transgender issue has been way blown out of proportion. And again, I don't think it's an issue. What I do think is an issue, though, is the anti-Russian and anti-North Korea propaganda that I heard on this show. I consider North Korea and Russia to be allies, and I look forward to forging good relationships with them. The people in North Korea are very, very happy, and under Putin's leadership, the people in Russia are very happy. They have free housing, free education, free healthcare. Certainly, we don't have that here, and are much worse off. So I look forward to Trump building a bridge to great relations with Putin and Kim Jong-un. These are good people who are doing good things for the world.
Hey, Adam,
That's very humorous. I guess you missed what happened in Ukraine and Crimea. So you don't get much news.
Ukraine and Taiwan have just gone on temper tantrums, and it's just unacceptable.
I know in Georgia you don't get much news because you have to go through these rednecks to get the real news. But let me tell you something. He surrounded Ukraine and said, I'm not going to invade Ukraine. Then he invaded Ukraine. Okay.
Well, George Bush said he wouldn't raise taxes in 1990, and then he had the biggest tax hike in history. So I just know that the people in North Korea are happy. Free housing.
Adam, I got two. Hold on a second.
And they're happy in Russia. I don't see a lot of happiness here.
No second. Adam, I got a question.
I'm happy. People are coming to Russia and Ukraine to fight. They are being killed mercilessly. And those who are still alive, they agree to continue to fight as long as they don't come back to North Korea. That's how happy they are, okay, Adam?
Have you ever listened to the Russian national anthem? It's beautiful.
How many people have actually physically been to Russia? I'm going to raise my hand because I'm one of them.
Yeah, you've been to Russia. I've not been to Russia.
I'm working on getting my visa.
Sasha, have you been to Russia?
Many years ago. Last time I was in Spain.
Now, Adam, have you been to Russia?
No, I'm working on getting my visa. But Sasha, I guarantee that you miss it.
you're
So, I mean, Nick, what was your opinion of Russia because you've been there?
Okay, yeah, actually, I was in St. Petersburg. It's a very beautiful city. The artwork is really nice. The people were actually really nice when I was there.
Told you.
They're very accepting of Americans. That was during the Obama administration. Then something happened, and the relationships deteriorated over a period of time to where they stand now. But my opinion of Russia was pretty good.
Hey, hold on a
Well,
second.
you know,
Adam,
most countries, when you visit them, you're going to hopefully see the good side of it, unless you're there
you'll see the
during
good
war or something like that. But what I'd like to say is that Albania, out of all the countries I've been to in the past 2-3 years, Albania to me is probably the happiest people I've ever seen, the healthiest, free health care. They have loans that they give people who want to buy their first house or maybe even a house, and you get the first 3 years interest free. So, I mean, they've got a really good system that is designed and built for the health and wealth of the people. And they got rid of communism in 1997. They had the end of their civil war, and they kicked out communism. And guess where all those communists came to? The leaders of that communist party came to America. So maybe that's why we're suffering and not doing so good and are not happy, is because, you know, some of those leaders have probably been pushing our leaders to behave the way they were behaving there.
Kim, the problem. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said,
was done.
Kim, Albania is beautiful. The only problem I have with Albania is it's incredibly, incredibly sexist.
No, it's not.
Oh, the men are very sexist towards women.
No. I got treated with so much respect, and they're treated very, very respectful there. I, in fact, was traveling with a group of people in the media industry and movie industry, and I would have expected that's where you see it the most. And the women were treated with a lot of respect. I mean, but you see that sexism exists in a lot of little cultures in different countries anyway. I think the worst was probably France
hold on a
and
second.
Russia.
I mean, you were there on a trip and everything, so of course people are going to be respectful. But Adam, is there a reason that you said that there are sectors in Albania? Is it based on your talking to Albanian students that you might have at your university, or what was the reason that you were making that statement?
I happen to know a lot of people who are from Albania, and I've also researched it, so there was some empirical basis for my opinion. But that is what I have heard, and that is what I've seen based on my research. And look, if we're going to be a successful country, we have to forge bridges to Russia and North Korea to make the world a safer place and to make it more economically prosperous for us. Because the people in these countries have free education, like Kim said, free health care, free housing, okay? They have good governments where people are happier because they're taken care of financially and psychologically. What you see in America, rampant drug use, crime, illegal immigration, unhappiness, mental health crises everywhere. That's why we're not happier than those countries. And I thank Mr. Putin and Mr. Kim Jong-un for what their efforts insisting.
Hold on.
I know that everybody else
pertinent-
has their hands up, but
You
I
guys
wanna
go.
mention
You guys
something.
go.
Well, let me.
You know, the
okay,
drugs
so-
are a problem, but they had the recent death of methanol poisoning of those two girls. So, you know, I think we're just on a rampage of unhealthy lifestyles in this country. I would hate to see us merge with BRICS. I don't think BRICS is there for our best interest. But, you know, if that's the way to survive, sometimes you have to adapt and overcome. I'm Sasha and then Rick. I don't know.
Sasha, then Rick.
Adam, thanks to you, this show is becoming a comedy show of some kind. And why not?
That's because you have a difference of opinion. That doesn't mean I'm comedic.
It's not a difference of opinion. It's you are applying to get friendly and to get close to the murderers and torturers of their own people. First of all, forget about Ukrainians or anybody else. They are torturing their own people, and the reason that they all love people, it's the fear of being thrown to jail without even a trial or anything for at least 10 years, sometimes longer. Okay, Kim, I have one question to you. How do you feel LGBTQ community doing in Albania?
I didn't notice any indifference towards them. You know, there are laws in every country. I think LG, the lesbian, bi, trans community is very much better in Spain. Spain has a really good open door policy. As far as Albania goes, I didn't feel any indifference to it at
All
all.
right, so in Russia, according to the World Health Organization, Russia has 8 times the rate of alcoholism of the U.S., 16% versus 2%. If you move to Russia, your life expectancy is 5 years less than the U.S. North Korea, 4 years less than the U.S. if they're telling the truth. So they're not that happy. They're not that healthy.
What's the obesity rate?
I'm sure it's less, but
They're
now we have
starving to death.
You're picking one metric.
Just interject. Can I?
yeah, that's just one freaking thing. Yeah, we're fat, but
Go ahead
we're
and
not as,
interject.
and we're not as bad as freaking Russians.
So, just to point out, there are tons of countries with, the free healthcare, the free education that you're trying to tout as only Russia and North Korea have. Also,
No, Albania has it.
There's a whole propaganda system around that keeps people in line in those actual countries. But hey, let's look at the World Happiness Ranking for 2024. Why don't we follow those countries that are above us? Because we're sitting at number 23. Australia is above us. We could follow Australia. Russia is 72. North Korea is not even on it because they won't allow people in there to actually do research in their actual area. So you're asking us.
Bali was one of the
I
happiest.
reject your ranking. I reject that ranking.
You're asking us to fall and follow somebody behind us. Let's follow, the places like Canada, who's above us. Let's follow places, New Zealand's above us. These individual places, which have all these things that you're talking about, like Shaq lives in a location that is actually better than we are in terms of a happiness rating. Let's find out better things from there than where you're talking about that's below us.
Hold on one second before you answer, because Sasha asked a legitimate question, so I looked it up. Apparently, Albania has made some progress on gay rights, but there is still room for improvement. Same-sex relations have been legal since 1995, and Albania has a non-discrimination law that prohibits discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The country also ratified Protocol number 12 to the European Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedom. So they do have some challenges. Apparently, same-sex unions are not recognized. Households headed by the same-sex couples are not eligible for the same legal protection as opposite-sex companies, and LGBT community members have experienced psychological violence, bullying, sexual harassment, and rape, and access to health care is a problem. So they are doing some activism work, but they have done some things that are good in that sense, including...
It's not the problem with the laws or protections. The problem is that people there, men, if you are homosexual, they can just beat you up on a street or in a club if it's happened in a club, if they find out about it. So they're all hiding. They cannot even openly declare that they're homosexual because of the consequences. Number one, beaten up. Number two, ostracized. Number three, they will be out of society. That's how bad is that. And with lesbians just as well, and transgenders, they wouldn't even allow to show.
But really quickly, Sasha, I'm looking at a website called the Nomadic Boys, and he actually has a gay travel to Albania. So apparently there are places that it's safe to go in Albania if you are part of that culture.
Read it, but don't go on the streets in Albania.
All right, U.S. Income per GDP per capita, U.S. 8th in the world, Australia 18th in the world, Russia 52nd in the world, and North Korea not even on the list because A, their economy is terrible, and B, they don't
Those
let anybody
statistics
in.
don't matter regarding happiness of the citizenry. You're using metrics to correlate with something, but is not causing it.
All right,
There's
they've been alcoholism. So 8 times as many alcoholics per capita in Russia as the U.S.
well, no wonder they're happier.
Hold on a second,
Wait,
Adam. I've got a question
Adam,
for
you
you because there was
can't
something that
use
happened in Atlanta.
Yeah, you can ask another
is-
question.
hold on one second.
At any point.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead,
just
Josh.
no problem.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shaquille. I didn't. Because like I said,
It's fine. Just go. You want to ask a question? Topic's moved on. Just go.
No, go ahead, Shaquille. I was actually looking up what I was going to ask Adam, but if you had a comment you were going to make, go
No
ahead.
point putting me up here when I've just said the topic's moved on. Okay, I'll wait for the next chance.
Okay. Well, the question I was going to ask, because it's something that's come up even with climate change. So you're in Atlanta. So I was just going to ask Adam, what do you know about this biolab fire that took place that apparently evacuated a lot of people, thousands of people that were sheltering outside Atlanta? So I'm just now seeing this story, even though it looks like it was a lab fire. So it was a chemical fire at a lab. And we know that sometimes the companies can do have destructive things. We know that even from Chernobyl as well as 3 Mile Island. But I just wondering, since you are in Atlanta, had you heard about this and what have you heard?
It's a good question. I haven't heard about it, so I can't speak intelligently on it. So, Shaq, why don't you go? Because I can't speak to that, unfortunately.
No problem.
I've got nothing to add to that question.
Go to what you want to add. I was just asking about that because I just seen that and I wanted to get to that earlier. But go to what you wanted to go to, Shaquille, whether that's responded to any of the things that people have said during the entire show.
Just comments made earlier about the happiness levels, free healthcare, education, etc., like that in Europe. Just for the record, to take a comment of where I live, I don't live in Australia. For the record, look, I don't actually understand. It's not a big deal. I'm just pointing that out. I actually don't really understand my American friends, including Kimberly, in the idea of complimenting Europe for its social services. And yet, when I'm asked about social services in America, I'm constantly saying your healthcare system is disgraceful. If I was American, I would be embarrassed that the entire world knows that there is a problem with healthcare in the US. It's something that there is wide support for. Now, I know that politically it may not be easy to solve the issue, and many presidents have tried, and most notably Obama in recent times. But most of the issues, I think, that face the US in providing the social services that Americans increasingly desire needs to be funded. And the best way to fund it, obviously, is through taxation. And I don't get it. I don't understand. It's like every time I make any mention of the United States looking at the tax regimes that are prevalent in other nations. Now, Albania and some of the other smaller European Union nations, it's a little bit different because they get direct subsidies from the European Union. But if you have a look at the powerful countries within Europe and the high tax rates that they have, they tax differently. Not only are the rates high, but it's also a much broader tax base. And I bring that up all the time. And every time I do on this show, I get shot down as favoring the rich. I don't get it. I don't agree with what Americans are proposing to do with their tax code because I don't think it works. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. I don't live in America and likely never will. But I don't understand why Americans are so insistent that it must be an increase, a progressive rate increase on marginal rates of tax when we know that doesn't work. We also know inheritance taxes don't work very well. That's why most European countries have scrapped them. So I just feel like if Americans want these services, I'd love for Americans to travel to Europe and to travel to other countries, but especially Europe because they are similarly wealthy over there. Travel over there, look at the lifestyle. The French drink a lot of alcohol. The Italians drink a lot of alcohol. The Spaniards drink a lot of alcohol and they smoke and but they exercise and but they also have like long meals. You can sit down for lunch in France that can go for 3 or 4 hours. So I think there's a really idyllic lifestyle, and I think Americans deserve to have the same sort of lifestyle in America. But there needs to be real structural change, in my opinion, in how your government operates and interacts with the people. And that's a bipartisan thing. It's not a Democrat-Republican thing or a left or right thing. It just needs the people collectively to say, this is what we want to do. And unfortunately, I don't think that we're seeing that.
Shaq, just to help you out with the tax information or what's going on, because we all completely agree that our healthcare system has been horrible. It has been completely horrible. and it definitely needs
Been
to
talking about it for 5 years.
Well, been talking about it for even longer than 5 years. Because
Right.
as you even pointed out, Pat, the only president who actually
10.
did anything towards our healthcare was President Obama when he tried to put together the whole ACA. What happened with that? Why is it trying to be stripped away? What happened before that and who was doing that is what you have to look at and what you have to understand. When we talk about, for example, right now, Trump honestly ran on, hey, I'm going to take away the ACA and replace it with, I don't know what. He hasn't announced anything. He's been running for 12 years and hasn't announced anything. The Republican Party, when it got put into place, said that they were going to strip it away and replace it back with what? What we used to have, which was worse than what we have with the ACA. So
Yeah.
the problems with the healthcare system, it was worse. The problems with the healthcare system itself, again, we completely agree. And looking at these other areas is what we want to do and what we want to bring forth to the U.S. and completely agree the tax structure itself has to change to be able to work.
Yeah, well, look, I agree with that.
And to fix the tax structure, because we cannot just up and say, okay, we're going to take it away and then throw in a flat tax, because there has to be some type of adjustment period if you're going to nitpick. But right now, because of the way we dropped the tax rate way before, and we went from a high tax rate and then began to actually shift the tax burden to away from those who could afford it to those who could not afford it in our progressive structure. We need to actually fix some of the holes that are there, see where we are, and then begin to change the tax structure. Because the loopholes you pointed out are problems. They're major problems, and we can all agree with that. But until we change those, we cannot see where we actually are. So the corporate tax rate itself, we've got to figure out. All these things we have to figure out.
Here's the thing. So firstly, obviously I'm joking. Firstly, Trump has come up with a great concept of a plan, and you'll find out the details shortly. So he's doing something.
Not come up with a plan. Saying concept of a plan is not a plan.
Now let's talk about the ACA just briefly. I personally, when this was first brought out, and I wasn't really as interested in American politics back then, I had some real concerns about what Americans were describing. And I think one of the issues that I observe is sort of the cherry picking of things. So you can look at the good benefits of universal or single payer healthcare in Europe and go, we'll take a bit of that. But then when it comes to introducing the same sort of tax structures that Europe has, Americans don't want to borrow it. You made a comment there where you said, well, we're trying to fix the tax code and the tax decreases. What that has done is it's meant that the people at the top are not contributing as, I'm paraphrasing what you said, are not contributing as much, and they should be contributing more. I agree with you. I've always said that. I actually agree with you. It's not that I have an opposition to those at the top contributing more. What I have an opposition to is a tax structure that doesn't achieve that goal. If we all agree that wealthy people should contribute more, if we then have a look at different tax systems around the world and see what they do and how they operate, if there is another tax system another country has that actually does bring in more revenue from the wealthy, that should be worth exploring. But the other thing that you will see that European countries do is that everybody pays into it. Some people pay into it more, but everybody pays into it. And the argument is that even though poorer people are having to contribute more to government, they're getting substantially more than that back in services, childcare, all those sorts of things. The problem is that when you try to have that discussion in America, Americans' knee-jerk reaction is, you just want to tax the poor. I don't think you can do that. You can't cherry pick. If you want to have the same sort of social services that Europe provides, okay, maybe you don't want to have as much as they've got, but if you want to have something that's more like what Europe has, the only way to achieve that is to tax people properly in a more broad way so that government has the resources to be able to deliver the services that people are asking for. And also, if I can just say one last thing just quickly on healthcare, but it's not a healthcare discussion. There are flaws, there are problems with universal healthcare like the NHS in the UK. There are problems with Medicare in Australia, which is a Medicare for all system here, with supplementary health insurance on top. There are issues with every system. Switzerland has a system which I think would work better for the United States, where everybody is required to have private health. If you can't afford it, it's paid for you. All of those things, I think, are worth looking at. But what Americans tend to do is they say, we want all this good stuff. We don't want any of the bad stuff. It just doesn't work that way.
So I think the problem that we run into with what you're talking about, and I agree, everybody, even those that want all these things, for example, the Bernie brothers or the whole Bernie situation, Bernie was even talking about raising taxes, and everybody on his campaign were agreeing. Those that were voting for Bernie were in agreement with that. People who really want to have that discussion really want to understand that, yes, taxes have to go up. I've said this, and taxes would hit me more. So I've said that taxes would have to go up. The problem comes into the communication and the demonization, because then what ends up happening is those individuals that are already making up this at the top begin to sell the idea that they are going to take your money away. And then there becomes a communication problem where those that are fighting against these raising of taxes are fighting against the ACA, which actually helped them, because truthfully, everything that you've said is true. The ACA itself had problems, but it was better than what we had. It's just a step, because everything moves slowly. We cannot have everything at once and everything is fixed. It's never going to happen.
Well, Jatovi,
Everything goes in steps. So the ACA with one piece was just a step forward, and there should have been something coming behind it to fix even the problems of the ACA. Same thing with the universal health care. They're all whole, completely agreed, but you got to fix
just the ACA
and fix.
But you break the argument down just to the ACA. Neither side of politics has talked about raising revenue by having a different tax system. The Republicans, especially Donald Trump, has just simply said, I'm going to maybe introduce tariffs, cut taxes that'll cause economic growth. The Democrats tend to say what we need to do is we need to soak the rich, especially the progressive wing, but that means we're going to have tax rates at 70% to 90%. The truth of the matter is, under any tax system that you've got, the very wealthy are going to structure their assets and investments in such a way as to reduce their taxation obligations. However, this is not a manipulation of the system. This is not them gaming the system a lot of the time. A lot of the time, how they can reduce their taxes is built into the tax code in order to incentivize them to invest in certain areas. For example, in America, you have the opportunity zones, which allows people to defer or eliminate their capital gains tax by rediverting that money into areas where it's desperately needed. So all countries have programs like that, which allow the very wealthy to effectively reduce their taxation obligations. I just think that what people see is, well, there are some people at the very top that aren't paying anything, and so therefore, well, let's just increase taxes on their income, but they're not earning anything in the first place. And that's where it distorts the market. And I think what you're referring to, Toby, is where people who earn a lot of money, people who earn, say, $5 million or $10 million a year, they're going to complain, well, look at how high my tax rate is. But the person earning $100 million a year doesn't matter to them because they've got everything structured.
So
I'll get you, Toby. Adam wanted to speak, as did Rick. And
I apologize. This is another thing, chat, we can go back and forth on.
Adam and then Rick.
2 quick points. I think the Affordable Care Act made sense in part because of the individual mandate. Requiring people to get insurance or assessing them a $200 penalty helps to defray the cost of health care because of the billions of dollars that hospitals lose every year from people who cannot pay but use the ER as their personal doctor. So I thought the ACA in that regard was good. Now, regarding Russia and North Korea, I think everyone knows I'm being hyperbolic when I talk about supporting them. Of course, I don't support them. My point, though, is that to have good foreign policy, we need to look at these countries from their point of view and not just our American point of view. Okay, people think differently, and we have to think outside the box if we're going to have real change and real stability in the world.
Rick, you had something you were going to add?
Yeah, just we're not doing any big changes in the next 4 years. The Congress is tied and paralyzed. Senate, there's no. The Congress didn't do anything in the last 2 years because they were tied. The new Congress won't do anything. All right, fine. Go on.
Rick, you say that. You say that.
In the last 2 years, you had the House being different to the executive, and you had obviously the Senate being the same. Now you've got the trifecta, so to speak. So, although he doesn't have enough to overcome a filibuster in the Senate, I think that there's likely to be more progress in Trump being able to do things that he wants. But I think as well that there has to be that
he's not going to raise taxes on anybody.
Well, hold on a second, but just really quickly, because we've only got about 3 minutes to go. I know you may say this is changing the.
Before you change the topic, Mark, technically, if he raises a tariff or puts a tariff on things, that's going to change things. He's talked about taxing John Deere, which, by the way, I happen to think that some of John Deere's practices are very, very unfair. And this is where I've made the comment before that I'm surprised that there isn't more progressives that actually are embracing some of Trump's cabinet picks and some of the people that Trump's talking to, because they are talking about doing something about unfair business practices. RFK Jr., you may not like his stance on vaccines and all the other stuff, but one thing that I think liberals generally always agreed on is that the chemical additives and artificial additives to food products is clearly a health risk. And so addressing that and making sure that farmers are able to grow, better quality crops in a way that's going to be less damaging to the environment, as well as providing people with more nutritious foods and less processed foods, or at least foods that are not as bad for them, is a step in the right direction. They've also talked about reining in the excesses of private equity. They've talked about reining in the excesses of big corporations who profit shift their profits overseas in a way that never touches US soil or only minimally touches the US soil. So I think there are ways for them to do it. And I actually, if I could make a prediction over the next 4 years, I actually think that you're going to see Bernie Sanders work much more closely with the Trump administration than what you would expect. And you may even see that with Elizabeth Warren. I know, Jacoby, you're smirking, but let me just remind you that politics makes for some funny bedfellows. I can't remember what it was that they worked on, but AOC and MTG actually co-sponsored a bill a few years ago, and they I don't think they're the best friends normally.
Earlier this year, actually, and
So,
everything.
John,
Just really quickly, because I got Jacoby and Rick, and then we got to wrap up because we got economics. But I was surprised to learn recently that, and this is, we can talk about this tomorrow, but apparently Trump had and I know it's a state issue, had the most death penalties in his last administration. So we'll see if that carries over to this year, and we can have a whole conversation about whether that is the case or not. But I just recently read that. But Jacoby, your thoughts, and then Rick, and then we got to get out of here.
On Trump having the most.
No, whatever you get to comment, I just made a sidebar that we can talk about later on.
Rick was first. First.
I just want to say, John Deere they're kind of mofos. They have a tech lock on their stuff. You pay $1 million to buy a combine, and then if it breaks, you're not allowed to fix it yourself. You have to send it to the dealer because they have a lock on all their computers.
Yeah, but it's like Monsanto. You're not allowed to replant the seeds and things like that.
So there's room to look at bad business practices in agriculture.
Well, it's technically good business practices, but what I would argue is that they're able to lock competition out of the market because of their size, and then enter into these unfair business practices. And I thought left and right people both agreed on this. Certainly these days, if that's the position of the right, the left should be embracing that, because that's what the left is all about. And I think this is where a lot of criticism has been leveled at Democrats in the recent campaign, that Democrats have been too establishment and too, you go out there and you say, look, I raised $1 billion, all the corporate CEOs love me. Well, that should mean that all the liberals and all the progressive anti-government, anti-establishment people go, hey, we're out of here. We're going over to the other side for a bit. So,
well, for people to agree about stuff, they have to know about it. And, the U.S., we've got there's so much BS flying around that some.
Well, you'll be very pleased to know about the rumor that MSNBC will be taken over by the great arbiter of truth, Elon Musk.
Yeah. People are still against those things, Shaq, and people still agree with those things. Problem is, money changes minds quickly.
Yeah, but on that note, we'll get ready to get out of here, and we'll have Economics Monday. Speaking of money, coming up next, we'll get ready to get over there and have Economics Monday coming your way at 11 o'clock.